many women enter relationships, and men too, with the expectation that this could be the one and it could be a long-term, romantic, intimate friendship, love relationship, partner for life. I think many of us have that hope. And often what looks great on the surface isn't so great underneath. And so it's just a good idea to have an awareness of who you're dealing with, especially when you first meet someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I so resonate with that because oftentimes the person that looks great on paper, so to speak, whether it's online or on a first date where there's this great chemistry or whatever, we really don't have enough to go on or to really know who this person is. And so I think women that want partnership and want love are sometimes vulnerable to skipping a few steps ahead in our minds at least, and sometimes in other ways before we really know what we're getting into. So I'm excited to tap into your wisdom on this topic. So how can you tell the difference between a man who's the real deal, and first of all, tell us what the real deal really means from your point of view, and how we know if a man is that or if he's a real danger instead?
It's such a good question. The number one telltale way to know if a man is a real deal is that he does what he says he's going to do. He makes and keeps his agreements. When he says, I'll pick you up on Friday night and take you to dinner, he follows through. And if he can't make it, he calls or texts and lets you know what the situation is and either reschedules or comes later, whatever the deal is. He keeps you informed. A real danger may make a lot of promises and it can feel so sexy and seductive and chemically charged. But if you step back and look at who he is, there's an inconsistency. There's a lot of promise, no follow through. There might be moments, periods of intense, it's called love bombing, attention driven focus on you, which feels so amazing. And then nothing. It just abruptly starts. A real deal will be consistent, maybe move a little slower, but show up and do what he says he's going to do. I think that's the biggest difference in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that real danger sometimes can be almost an addictive kind of thing because it can be so exciting and so intoxicating and almost irresistible.
It without a doubt it is. It's like it gets in your body. Your chemistry is just crazy. But it feels so good that it's often mistaken as being a soulmate connection or a real deal because it's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's the chemistry talking. It's the addiction talking. But it's hard when you have that to tell yourself that it's not real. It really is hard to talk yourself out of it because it feels so amazing.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like this is one of the reasons why some women are kind of attracted to kind of the bad boy types?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, we as humans, life happens on that edge of fear and excitement. You don't want to be too complacent because that just gets dull and boring. You don't want to live too dangerously because you could die.
Right.
That edge of fear and excitement is very intoxicating. And whether it's a love relationship or maybe it's a new career opportunity or a move or something, a new passion explored, there's a feeling in the body that triggers an excitement. And then there's also a fear that comes with it, which is the vulnerability or fear of failure or rejection, or it's not going to work out, or maybe I'm not enough. So all these emotions are jumbled up together, but it's alive. You're not flatlined. You're operating on all cylinders. So sometimes it's hard to gauge, and you just have to go through it. I don't know how else to say. You have to go through it till you know if it is real or if it is a danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now I'd like to hear your take on this. Sometimes we hear advice given from experts where they say it's really important to pay attention to how you feel when you're with a man. And I absolutely believe that's true. But I think there's a second piece that is not so often mentioned, which I like to share with my clients, and I like to hear your take on this, because it goes along with this topic we're talking about. And that second piece is, I think you also need to pay attention to how you feel when you're not with him. Like, do you feel continually insecure? Do you feel like you don't know where in the world he's coming from? So even though the times together might be these exciting, intoxicating highs, if you're constantly feeling like when you're away from him, you have no idea where he's coming from, you feel very insecure, you feel like he's giving these mixed messages, you feel like he's giving you just enough to keep you hanging on kind of thing, you don't really feel very good when you're not with him. But sometimes because those highs are so good when you are with him, it can be deceptive.
Totally. I think the difference is when you are with a quality, a real deal, you'll have a sense of peace and relief. When you're with a dangerous man, there will be a sense of wanting. That's the addiction. Mm-hmm. You want him. You want him to call. You want to reach out. You want that connection. You want his attention. And you are just not settled in your own system, mm-hmm. because there's so much anxiety. And your friends notice it. The people around you get it. You don't often. It's like, no, it's good. I can handle it. And others are like, you know what? You're acting like an addict, mm-hmm. even when you can't see it in yourself.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like a starving, crazy-making feeling almost. It's the constant checking of your phone. When's he going to call? When he's going to ask me out again? When am I going to see him again? And oftentimes I feel like these kinds of men give women just enough to kind of keep them hanging on, but they're always feeling starving.
That's absolutely right. It's like they have a recipe, like a secret recipe between themselves of how to do this. And women can do it too with men. It can go both ways. It's a personality disorder. And basically these bad boys, if you will, these dangerous men, they're wired differently. They don't have the same emotions as a normal person. They're narcissists, and they go, I'm not a therapist, but they go into a group called the cluster B personalities, which includes the narcissists, the sociopaths, the psychopaths, the antisocials, the borderlines. And their emotions are like extremely up or down. They're love you or hate you. They have no empathy. They have no guilt. They have no remorse. And they really can't feel genuine love, even though their mask and who they're presenting themselves to be can be so convincing that you want to believe them, because it's so difficult to believe that someone would actually lie to your face and tell you one thing which has no bearing in truth whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And that's scary. Mm-hmm. That's really scary.
It is scary. It is scary. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking about some of the women I've talked to and some of the experiences I had as a single woman where the chemistry is just off the charts. And that sometimes feels like the holy grail for both men and women. I mean, how often do we hear people say, well, there has to be chemistry? So yes, we want chemistry, but how do you balance that, Sherry? What advice would you give if if a woman is out there who's feeling just this incredible attraction, this physical attraction and this chemistry, it's kind of getting swept away with this. And a lot of these men are very charming. So what advice would you give to kind of keep her balance and assess whether she's in a situation where she's likely to end up lying there in the smoke, dust, and ashes wondering what's happened, or if it really has good potential?
There's so much good stuff in that. In the ideal scenario, I would say to the woman, okay, explore the chemistry, be available for him. Do not put his penis in your body. Stop there so that you don't become more sexually bonded and addicted than you already are to the chemistry that he's showering you with. Sometimes it's not that easy, because you do get swept away if it's really hot and heavy and it just feels so good and you think you can handle it. But that's where I would start. I would say, determine where your boundary is physically, and at least that gives you some more objectivity. And the other is, and again, it's so easy to say, so difficult to do at times when you're really into someone, to keep options open and duty date other men. I made a movie called Duty Dating about a woman who has to, on the advice of a love doctor, date 3 men simultaneously, because with 1 it's over focus, 2 is an either or, and with 3 you can keep perspective. It's a really tough thing to do, but it does give you perspective if you have other men in your life to choose from other than this one. But it's very easy for the narcissist, for this charming bad boy, to just put everybody else as faded into black because they are so shiny and so spectacular, especially in the first few months, that you just don't care about seeing anybody else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good advice. If you can manage the physical side of things so you don't have that hormonal bonding on top of whatever else is going on, I think that can help you to kind of balance. I always say you have to balance the head, the heart, and the hormones. Yeah. 3 H's. And if the hormones take over, sometimes the head goes right out the window, right?
It's so very, very, very true. And yet, all right, I also choose to look at things in a different way. I shift the prism, if you will. I've had a man like this in my life, and a couple of them, and I look to what it is they're teaching me. How can I learn from this experience and not just survive through it or avoid it, but thrive through it and understand what I'm dealing with so that I'm not afraid of it, but that I know how to protect myself around it. Because there are a lot of people out there running the world who have these disorders. So there's one philosophy of avoid it at all costs and run away. I'm of the philosophy of protect yourself, understand, find deeper knowledge in what you're going through, and be able to survive through it so that you're better off on the other side. And you will know so much quicker and easier when you meet another one of these personality types. You'll just know. Mm-hmm. And that's when it will come into play as saving you a lot of time. But I do know women who are in relationships with men like this for years, and they are really, really damaged and victimized by these relationships. And I think it's because they just don't have the awareness or good therapists or support going through it to know what they're dealing with. And there's a tendency when you're in a relationship with a dangerous man to feel very isolated, like you're all alone. And also that this is where your self-esteem starts taking a pounding, that there's nobody else out there who will love you like he does. And even if he's not perfect, and even if he's inconsistent, and even if he's lying and betraying you, that it's okay because when you do have him, for the little bit that he gives you, it feels so good that you'll just be okay with that and accept that.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So then it's up to the woman to say at a certain point, no, wait a minute, I'm the prize. I'm the one that needs to be courted and prioritized, not you. And I'm not going to put up with this behavior any longer. And again, it's not easy, but it's like, if you can stay till you're desensitized, so you don't really care what they do, then you've really won. If you can't, and they continue to destroy you, your soul, your spirit, your esteem, it probably is a good idea to just go no contact and cut them out. Because that up, down, love, hate is so hard on your body. And every time you get the drop from the abruptness of his leaving, or a comment, or his disappearance, or whatever, there's damage done to your body because you feel it. You feel it physically in your body when that happens. And if you've been through it, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one thing that there was so much there, Cherry, and so much wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. One thing that I thought about as you were speaking is, I think another thing that becomes addictive about these kinds of relationships is that so many women get caught up in what I like to call fantasy. They believe that if they hang in there long enough, or they keep giving more, or they keep being a certain way that they think this man wants them to be, that eventually he's going to give more, or want more, or commit to her for a deeper partnership.
Yeah. That's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy if you're dealing with one of these personality types, because they just don't have the capability of doing it. They just can't do it. And it's really not their fault, in the sense of they can't help how they're wired. They can't help being abused. They can't help who they are. At the same time, you know, you have to take responsibility for yourself in knowing what is it better for me, or is it not? You know, I always say, if they're 51%, keep them. If the stock drops, it's time to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the antidote to fantasy is being in truth, really acknowledging what the truth of a situation is. And that can be easily said and very hard to do too. Yes,
because these dangerous men are so convincing that you actually believe that you know the truth, that they're telling you the truth, and you want to believe it. And when you're with them, you do believe it, hook, line, and sinker. And it's only later when you realize what they said isn't the truth, because you find out something else that is, or they confess later something opposite than what they told you. And I think this is another telling sign. Often these dangerous men will profess to have solutions and be protectors and be role models, or they have an idealistic way of deeming how the world should be, but the same rules don't apply to them. And that's another way they like say something and you're in such admiration and such respect of like, wow, you should be president. Well, you should, you know, you're magnificent, shall we say. And then you realize they didn't mean it. And I think one of the hardest things is to accept in yourself that you've been lied to, that you've been betrayed, and everything that you thought was a possibility is a fantasy. And that's all it was. And that's all it will ever be. And it's very, very, very hard when you have emotions, and particularly if you're empathetic and compassionate, and if you're smart in other areas of your life, you just don't feel that you are capable of being so deceived. So you actually find yourself working against that and tell yourself, well, it's okay. I believe what he's telling me. It's hard to accept. It's hard to accept somebody just lying to you flat out. Yeah. So if you are in a situation like this, know, number one, you're not alone. And know, number two, that you have to be compassionate with yourself and accept that you were conned, and just mind your body and mind your purse, because those are in danger.
I'm so glad you added that piece about minding your purse as well as minding your body. My husband worked for years for the Division of Securities here in Utah, and one of the key things they have done is help people avoid the Ponzi schemes and the financial fraudsters and that sort of thing. And in doing some of this work and some of this community education that he's done in the past with the division, one of the things that he's mentioned to me on numerous occasions is that two populations that they target are single women, those that have jobs, careers, savings, retirement, whatever, and the elderly.
Yes.
And so this is a very real piece. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I wouldn't have thought about that in this context. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, in addition to, being clear about where your boundaries and what your values are in terms of your body and how you want to involve yourself that way sexually. Also, minding your purse. Wow, I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's dangerous. They can wipe you out physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. They can wipe you out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of situations out there where things like that have happened to women. And so I'm so grateful that you brought that up. I think one of the keys, coming back to this whole fantasy and being in our truth, I think another key to this, Cherry, and again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is for a woman to be clear about what her wants and needs are. Because I think in the midst of these kind of relationships, sometimes we can lose touch with that.
Well, keep in mind, you can express your wants and needs, but if it doesn't line up with his wants or needs, then he will override you. Mm-hmm. And your needs and wants can be swayed if he is a very convincing person. So you really have to be super duper strong. I mean, you find yourself doing things that you normally wouldn't think you would be doing. But because it's presented like it's okay, you'll go, okay, well, that won't be so bad. Later, you'll think, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? But in the time, it can often appear like, oh, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. You actually make excuses for it, defend it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and then in so doing, if you've compromised in that way, or you bought into his way of thinking, or been convinced that his way is the right way, you can lose that connection, and you can start to not even know what your wants and needs are. And then you kind of collapse. Those boundaries collapse. All of that collapses. And that makes you even more vulnerable.
This is when women are in danger of losing themselves. This is what women talk about when they say, I'm afraid to fall in love because I don't want to lose myself. All right? And so it's super, super important for, number one, to at least go into any relationship game knowing what your personal boundaries are, and I think knowing more what you don't want than what you do want, because what you don't want keeps you protected. That no that a woman can say is the most powerful word we can use. That is the veto power. That is where our femininity holds its value. For a real deal man, he will fall in love with a woman's virtue, not her vagina, right? So it's like maintaining the virtuous being that you are as a woman will take you somewhere. And just realize that, I remember Pat Allen, who is my mentor, Dr. Pat Allen, preaching years ago about women need shark cages when they go out dating. because it is very, very real that we can be eaten alive if we don't know how to protect ourselves. And I think my conversation is shifting, because I'm a romantic idealist. I'll just say that. And I had all these hopes and dreams, and I was married to an Italian, and we had a wonderful marriage until it was over. And it's been since then, and being single again and seeing who's out there and dating and experiencing and experimenting, that I realized, wow, the landscape is a lot different from how I remember being in my idealistic ways. I mean, there are a lot of pitfalls, and as skilled as I am, I'm still learning. I'm always learning, but don't take it's not stuff to be taken lightly. It's really not. I hate to sound like such a scary woman, but at the same time, you just have to have the awareness, or it can be very dangerous.
Well, it can be very dangerous, and it can be very costly to a woman in terms of her self-esteem, in terms of her time. I mean, we can never get our time back. Women can invest weeks, months, years into these kinds of relationships.
I think you just hit on something really profound and poignant, and that is, the only thing we have is our time and our energy. And I think at the end of the day, the art, the work, the skill is about how to manage your energy management, because that's really what our commodity is. And it's like, where do you want to invest your energy? Where do you want to invest your time? I propose that you look to investing your time and energy into things that make you feel good, things that give you peace, things that give you joy, things that give you relief, purpose, passion, the uppers of life. If you are with a man who makes you feel bad about yourself, who always leaves you feeling disappointed, who always gives you that drop, that pit in the stomach, that slap across the face with his actions or his behaviors, it's not a good energy investment. Mm-hmm. And that is when you're present with a man, how do you feel? Well, sometimes you can be really turned on, but there's another aspect of it that's underneath. And that is, do I feel safe? Do I feel protected? Because often, again, a dangerous man can come on as if they are your protector. And it turns out they are your greatest villain. They are the most unsafe people you can be with.
Mm-hmm. And that comes into this idea of us paying attention to our, whether we call it our feminine intuition or our inner guide, or what feels right for us, because I believe we have that as a gift as women. And sometimes we're tempted to ignore it, push it aside, not pay attention to it, or question our own wisdom.
You're so right. I just had an invitation for a date to go surfing. I'm here in California right now, and I want to go surfing. And I've been surfing years ago, and I thought this is great. And so, of course, I said yes. And then I'm like, but I don't have a wetsuit, and I haven't been surfing for a while. And he's taking me to San Diego, and he said that there was a rocky beach, and the waves are only 4 to 5 feet. Well, that seems pretty tall to me, And so that night, before going, I had this freak out in my body, and my body was like, you are not going surfing. And my head was like, of course I am. I love, I want to go. I love the ocean. I want to be with him. I want to go. And my body was like, it's unsafe and you're not going. And so I expressed my fear to him, and he just canceled the whole day. It was like I was being punished because I expressed an emotion. Mm. And even though like I wanted to reach out and explain, I just thought my body was like, let it go. Not a great place to invest your energy. Let it be.
Mm-hmm.
And so but I'm so relieved and happy that I listened. I listened. And I didn't put myself in a situation where I had a premonition, like there's going to be an accident, like this just doesn't feel right at all. I'm terrified, not just nervous, I'm terrified. And that's when you just know it's not right. It's just not right.
Yeah, and if you hadn't been so aware, you could have overridden that with the thought of, oh, I want to go, and this doesn't make sense that I'm having this response.
Exactly. And it's so easy for us to do that. I don't want to look ridiculous. I don't want to appear like a coward. I really want to go. I will ignore my feelings and I'll just show up, because if I don't, then he's going to be upset and he won't ask me out again. Well, in this situation, if he doesn't ask me out again, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's not easy. It still hurts, but it's my own intuition and deeper knowing protecting me. And I just believe that the Tony Robbins saying, the universe is working for you, not against you. And so even when I'm disappointed, like, gosh darn, why did my body have to get in the way? Because I really was looking forward to this date. I have to believe that my body had a deeper understanding of what was really going on. And I say thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful example. And I really appreciate you sharing that. I know over the years, as I've had conversations with so many women, and many of them have shared with me experiences of relationships that haven't worked out or have been very painful, and some of the kinds of things we've been talking about today they've experienced in these relationships. And I will often ask them, I'll say, okay, I realize hindsight is 20/20, and now you've got some perspective looking back on this. And as you now look back on it, can you remember a time early on in the relationship where something inside of you was feeling a little off, or you were feeling uncomfortable, or you were doubting or questioning, or there were even red flags waving in the wind that you didn't pay attention to, chose to ignore, dismissed at that time? And I can't even tell you how many times the answer is yes. One woman said to me, there were so many red flags, I felt like I was in the Chinese Communist parade, which I thought was kind of a funny way to say it. But the point is, we have this as a gift. I believe it's a divine feminine gift that we have. And I'm so grateful that you paid attention to that, even though you wanted to go surfing. But I think the message here that you shared from sharing that story is really powerful, Cherry. So I'm so grateful you gave that example. Yeah.
You're welcome. And maybe it will speak to someone listening who really has that feeling of, oh, I want it to be right, but I know it's not. And that's a really, it's tough,
Cherry, I want to give you a chance to just leave us with maybe a little parting thought or last piece before we wrap up today.
A parting thought or last piece. Well, what's coming up is just do your best to look and feel your best and find the joy in your life. And that sounds so trivial, I know, but that is really where I believe the magic happens. And when we get out of wanting and expectations, then we are less prone to be disappointed. And so if we just embrace the moment, say yes until it's a no, and be grateful for what we have, I think it will take us to where we need to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually very beautiful, Cherry. I really appreciate that as a parting thought. And we'll see you for more. Bye-bye for now.